What is up, guys? It's Doo Poker here, back for another hand. This was a cool hand I played maybe 6 weeks ago. So it's a small blind versus big blind hand for a single raise pot. Okay, so I have Queen of Clubs, 9 of Diamonds. There's a lot going on in this hand, so I brought a lot of data, and we're also going to look at the solver outputs and kind of try to figure out what my opponent was thinking and how we can use the information from MDA to make an educated guess on whether he's over or under bluffing the spot. All right, so I have Queen of Clubs, 9 of Diamonds. I raise 3x, and my opponent calls. Okay. The flop comes Ace of Spades, Queen of Spades, 6 of Hearts. So first thing we need to know here, you have 2 sizings here, okay? You want to go really big, overbet, or really small, okay? Now Queen 9 doesn't really want to bet because it doesn't really accomplish much, right? We're either way ahead or way behind. So I put Queen 9 in the checking range, okay? Now, when I check to the big blind on the flop, his stab sizing is only supposed to be huge. Why? He's never supposed to go small because you have to understand what you're targeting, okay? So you go big to target all non-ace X because ace X is not folding on the flop. It's too early in the hand, okay? So you overbet to target Queen X, to target 6X, to target kings, jacks, tens, gut shots, right? Ace X is never folding on the flop, okay? So I'm going to skip back and forth. This is a real hand I played, so we're going to go to the hand, and we had Queen of Clubs, 9 of Diamonds, and this is the flop. I decide to check. Now, my opponent, look what he did. He made a boo-boo. He made a big, this is his first mistake, okay? He bet too small. That was his problem. He bet too small in the flop, okay? So this is a very important data point. Keep this in the back of your head. So he bet like 30% pot, okay? So this stab sizing accomplishes nothing, okay? So we're going to go back. So this is hard to do in GTO because GTO never really goes this sizing, but we'll just run it just for fun. So anyways, he goes 30. Let's say 33. Of course, I call. Now the turn comes a 5 of Spades, okay? So I naturally check to the big blind. Now something interesting happens. Now, this is what my opponent does. Overbets. He overbets. He bets. What's he bet? 335 into 238. 335 into 238. So he goes 140%, okay? Now we're at a crossroads here, okay? Because even though this is not really a GTO line, if I put it in GTO for, he went 140, we'll say 125. Now Queen 9 is always a fold, okay? In fact, it's kind of a big mistake, right? It's kind of a big mistake, like almost a big blind. But we have to understand MDA. I'm going to show you some MDA, okay? What do we first know about MDA? This is the single raise pot in position pre-flop caller big blind versus small blind. What do we know about how people play? We know they over barrel the turn after stabbing the flop, okay? That's the first thing. And this is for all sizings, right? So they always stab flop and bet turn more than GTO. That's the first thing, okay? Now we have to look at board texture. What do we know about board texture? Flush complete turn. I'm going to show you bet 30 OB. Okay? This is the exact spot. Now, we know third to flush is right around what the aggregate is. Okay? But we also know in the bet flop or stab flop, bet turn, bet river line, that the turn third to flush is an over bluff data point. How do we know this? Okay, I'm going to be jumping around here a lot, okay, because I have a lot of data for this. We know this is the field as single raise pot, in position, pre-flop caller, big blind versus small blind. Bet 30, bet, doesn't distinguish the size and the turn. Bet 50 on the river, okay? But what do we notice? Turn third to flush, 35 weak. What's the aggregate? 32 weak, okay? So we know this. So we know, because if you think about how people play, right, you have to think, most people think you will not check call flop with a flush draw. And it's a reasonable assumption. Most people see bet their flush draws. They don't check call flop. So because of this, population attacks flush complete turns, okay? There's an overfold as well. So 2 data points that are important. He bet 30 on the flop, which he should never do. That's a sizing tell for weakness. On the turn, he OBs. So we decide to call, okay? Remember, he OB'd the turn. River is a 5 of hearts. I check back to my opponent, okay? Let's say for to be solver friendly, we have queen 10 here, okay? Just to be solver friendly. Now, what does he do on the river? Okay, let's see. OB, I call. River, OB again. He OBs again, okay? So now we're at another crossroads. But we know, 1, bet 30 on the flop. Not a thing in GTO land. That's a sizing tell. 2, flush complete turns on the stab flop bet turn is over bluff data point. Also over bluffed in the stab flop bet turn bet river line, okay? A 4th thing I want you to think about is the nuts changed on the river, okay? Because now I can have a boat, right? I could have very easily check called flop with aces or check called flop with queens. Then on the turn, once it OBs, I'm not going to check raise turn. I'm just going to call, right? So I can easily have a boat. So a good heuristic is when the nuts change and your opponent overbets on 2 streets in a row, specifically turn river. That is an over bluff line, okay? So there's a lot going on here. But we know he overbluffed, overbet turn on the flush complete turn, right? So that's a good data point to call. He also bet 30 on the flop. Another good data point to call. He also overbet turn and then overbet river when the nuts changed again, right? Nuts were different on the flop. Nuts were different on the turn. Nuts were different on the river. So you have to put all that together in game, and you have to make the call, okay? So there's a lot going on in this hand, but when you break it down from an MDA standpoint, it actually makes sense to call this river, right? Because there's all these data points that line up that are just overbluff data point, overbluff data point, OB, OB when the nuts change. It's like not a thing. That's very overbluffed, okay? But you also have to understand this. This is the most important thing, okay? So he bet, what did he bet? It was 908. He bet 1078, okay? So let's do the math. 1078 divided by 908, okay? So he bet, let's say, 120% pot. So how many bluffs should he have in GTO land? 35%, right? It's because you do 120 divided by 340. 35% bluffs, okay? So we're probably only going to be good here maybe 40% of the time. So you're supposed to lose more than you win, okay? So if we lose here, it's not the end of the world because, I mean, fortunately we didn't lose, but I'm saying you're going to lose more than you win when you bluff catch is the important point. But we still know from the data that we made a profitable call, okay? So thankfully he was bluffing. We called it down. Looks like a miracle call, but there is logic to our decision. All right, guys, I know that was a lot to take in, but I thought this was a cool hand. I wanted to show you some data for it and how we can use MDA to piece together the puzzle of when an opponent is overbluffing. All right, guys, thanks for checking out the video, and I will see you in the next one.